Maine Voices Live here at the Portland Museum of Art. Thank you for joining us, and a special warm welcome to all of our home delivery subscribers. We love you the most. We have a more than sold out crowd. In fact, we have about a dozen angry subscribers upstairs waiting. And I do anything I possibly can for them. So it would be helpful if you have your stuff on empty seats next to you to kind of take it off, because we really think every seat is going to be full. We may actually have to double up. So if you're willing to take someone on your lap, if you could just raise your hand. And I would like to start, of course, by thanking the sponsors of Maine Voices Live: AAA Viking Cruises, Stroudwater Lodge, and Portland Downtown. Our in-kind sponsors, Hub Furniture and the Press Hotel, and our presenting sponsor, who's been with us from the beginning, H.M. Hazen. Thank you to our sponsors. You are absolutely in for a treat tonight as Greg Reck, the chief photographer of the Portland Press Herald, interviews photographer Peter Ralston. So let me first start by telling you a little bit about Greg, or Gregory, as it says in his bio. Greg Reck began working at the Press Herald in 1997. He has photographed throughout Maine, covered the 9/11 attacks, embedded with the Maine Army National Guard in Iraq, covered the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina and the 2010 earthquake in Haiti. He was named the 2004 Maine Press Association Journalist of the Year with columnist Bill Nemitz for their work in Iraq. And after only 10 years at the Press Herald, Greg won the Master Photographer Award from the New England Society of Newspaper Editors, an award usually reserved for veteran photographers. Greg will be leading the talk tonight with Peter Ralston, who has photographed the coast of Maine since 1978. He is especially drawn to the working communities that define coastal Maine's character. His work has been seen in countless books, magazines, featured on network television, and has been exhibited in galleries, collections, and museums throughout the United States and abroad. In 2003, his photography, as well as his role as co-founder of the Island Institute, was awarded an honorary Doctor of Laws degree at Colby College. In 2010, a documentary short was produced about his work. He lives with his wife, Terry, just a 5-minute walk from the Ralston Gallery at the head of Rockport Harbor. Please welcome to the stage Press Herald photographer Greg Reck and Peter Ralston.
All right. I guess the first question is, are we on?
Yes.
Excellent.
Second, scalp some tickets.
All right. Well, thank you all for coming out tonight. And I would like to thank the Portland Museum of Art for hosting us in the beautiful Osher Auditorium. And thank you, Peter, for coming all the way down from Rockport.
Treat.
And just so that you folks in the audience know, Peter and I might be looking at my phone because the phone is actually going to run the pictures. So rather than look up there, we're going to be looking here. And if
But I turned off my phone.
Yes. Yeah, well, my phone's in airplane mode, so.
Hint.
All right. So normally, with a photographer, I like to start at the beginning, and usually the beginning is, when did you get your first camera? But I want to go back farther than that, because I know, well, for the record, his first camera was an Ansco Sure Shot, which he still has, and he still uses. It takes 120 roll film. As a matter of fact, the other day when I was up, you took a photo of your beautiful and energetic puppy, Jenny. So that was your first camera, but I want to go back to when you were 8 years old. You grew up in Chadds Ford, Pennsylvania, and you had some neighbors move into the house next door. And you were kind of curious about them because unlike the other dads in the neighborhood who left every morning to drive off to work, this guy stuck in his barn and worked in his barn all day, and you quickly became a nuisance around the house.
I tried.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
Well, my parents bought a house in 1957 in Chadds Ford, Pennsylvania. This is before Chadds, I mean, it was when Chadds Ford was still real country. It was still, like where we live today in Maine. People didn't lock doors. It was wonderful. But it was a leap of faith on their part, this old, part of an old Quaker mill property. It was pretty funky, but it was the next year, 1958, that Andy and Betsy Wyeth bought the house right next door, which was, there we go. Really the beginning, in a way, of sort of my Forrest Gump-like life. It just no, seriously. It was the blessing of all times that next door, Andy and Betsy moved in. They were never the Wyeths. It was no big deal. They were just Andy and Betsy, and they tolerated me and my brothers running through the property. And as you know, used to spy on Andy when he was, painting. This strange guy who wasn't like our fathers. He didn't have a job. He didn't go to work. He would just drive around in his Jeep and get it stuck in ditches. And he lived making this amazing work, which was just the coolest thing in the world, even at, 10 when they really moved in, and it was amazing.
And from there, you, after high school and getting into photography more, you started basically a globe-trotting career as a photojournalist, freelance photojournalist.
The lowest type.
Traveling all over the world, and you were represented by Black Star in New York City. And after a few years with that, you got a call from Andrew he asked you to photograph his artwork. And talk about that a bit, and how did that sort of disrupt your photojournalism, or did it not disrupt the photojournalism?
No, I think it was kind of like a big dollop of icing along the building of the cake, along the way. So they saw me. I mean, everybody knows, if you know anything about Andy's work, Andy never painted more than a few miles from the studio. And for the most part, that's true of Jamie. It's just how these guys work. And I'd gone off, and these were heady years, the late 60s and early 70s, and traveling around, mostly in the country, but abroad as well. It was heady stuff. It was really exciting. Back when you could travel a lot on planes, it was a pleasurable experience, unlike today. It was great. But at some point, Andy and Betsy along the way morphed from being sort of tolerant, wonderful neighbors to sort of caring, and then there was really a lot of loving in there, and they sort of tried to nurture and encourage me. So they saw me flitting around, and it was everything but, a couple miles from home. And very deliberately, I didn't get it at the time. It was sort of like the frog in the water experiment, and they slowly turned the heat up, and seriously, this is what they used to play us, They certainly played me, and I didn't always get it. They asked if I would photograph Andy's paintings. And I thought, well, that's got to be the easiest thing in the world. It's not dealing with crazy people or, challenging or life-threatening or, exotic. You just throw a painting on a wall, hit it with some light, and that's it. But what they were doing that I didn't get at the time was they were trying to slow Peter down, which many have tried. Most have failed. But they, it was sort of like they were forcing me, in a way, it was like doing the pencil studies of cones and cubes and spheres. It was like, slow him down. The result of which I had all this time with these incredible paintings, first Andy's and Jamie's and then C's, but then publishers, the word got around that I was actually good at photographing paintings. So I got to see a lot of artwork, a lot of great, I was in the heart of collections, and there were no guards around, with all due respect to guards here, saying don't touch or stay away. I could get right up to them and touch great paintings. And it was all part of, it was both slow down, be precise, don't work with 35 millimeter cameras, slow down and perfect your technique, and further exposure to the innards of work.
Yeah.
Greg knows I give long answers. I'm sorry.
No. Yeah. So if you see me cutting Peter off, it's because I want all of you to have time to ask questions in addition to me. So let's, Andrew and Betsy clearly had taken a shine to you, and I'm going to fast forward us to 1978 when Betsy calls you up, and she doesn't ask you if you want to come to Maine. It's an edict. She basically tells you, you're coming to Maine for the summer.
Those were her words, with the finger pointed at us at dinner over there.
Oh, it was over dinner?
Over their table. They had a table just like this. This is their house in Cushing. But down in Chadds Ford, early American tavern table, and that night at dinner, it was like, you are coming to Maine this summer. And I did. And the remarkable thing about that, really, Forrest Gump, on steroids, was I'd grown up. We didn't come to Maine as a family in the summer, but the Wyeth sure did, and they'd come back, and out of the Jeep, or back in the old days, but then trucks, would come these paintings that Andy and Jamie, but it was Andy's work that really got me. And I'd run over the house, and I'd see the work that he had done that summer. And I'd hear the stories. They'd tell these stories, which were often very colorful, sometimes language our parents didn't use. That was intriguing. And the stories were filled with, sort of skullduggery and sex and, pirate fishermen and all this stuff. So when, in the summer of '78, came to Maine, it was riding around with Andy in the Jeep and with Betsy in the boat a bit, seeing these places that I'd grown up seeing on the walls in Chadds Ford and meeting the people. So they were totally playing me. It was another part of this education they gave me that I didn't get that's what they were doing at the time. But they gave me Maine. I wouldn't be here today. I would not have met Terry, none of this, but for the gift of Maine, which is one of the greatest gifts. And they totally knew what they were doing, and they totally played me.
And I'm going to get back to the gift of Maine in a minute, but I want to ask you, I forget the exact year, maybe 1982, where you were out of state on a freelance photojournalism assignment or something, and you got a call from Betsy, and she said, okay, I did it, you got me into this, you need to come here and help me.
Yeah.
What was that?
So I was in Moline, Illinois, figure, and Betsy called me, tracked me down, and the conversation was, you got me into this, the ink is dry, I just bought Allen Island, this is a 450-acre island off Port Clyde, and the island, let's have some fun. Quoting Betsy, what the hell am I going to do with an island the size of Monhegan? Let's have some fun together. The island is yours in all but title, let's have some fun. And that was the beginning, and it was 1980.
1980.
God, we had a lot of fun on Allen. She had no clue. Well, she did, that's wrong. She did have a clue. Allen Island at that point was this feral, 450-acre, wood-choked, you couldn't crawl. On Allen, I couldn't see from here to that post. It was so choked with trees. But Betsy had a vision, just like Andy, sort of a vision would just sort of click in his mind. Betsy had a vision for that island. And I was lucky enough to help her, but she couldn't fully articulate it, but it became what is on Allen Island today, really an extraordinary village, a home for them, a place where fishermen were not dispossessed by rich summer people, so they had to go away. She built a huge wharf, fishermen from Cushing, Friendship, and Port Clyde, who don't always get along well in the water. It all really worked politically there, and it was, I know this is a long answer.
Yeah.
But that really, what Betsy envisioned kind of. In 1980, she really fleshed it out. And really and truly her greatest masterpiece, Allen and Benner Islands. Did I answer the question?
No, yeah, you did. And I was going to ask, though, if that's still the case today, because I know if you take the ferry out of Port Clyde to Monhegan, sometimes you go through those islands, and I've seen traps on the wharf, so the lobstermen can still work off those wharves there.
Oh yeah, it worked.
Great.
I mean, what Betsy Wyeth did, and I was so thrilled that this summer the Farnsworth recognized her with its Maine in America award. As Jamie said, they did a little documentary about Betsy this summer, and it was a great line of Jamie's. Jamie said, Mummy really should have signed all those paintings. I mean, and it's God's truth. I mean, Betsy, it wasn't like she was, creating, this sort of fake world. It was not a stage set. It was really the way they lived. It was her vision. She created these homes, the mill that you saw in Chad's Ford, the farm in Cushing, Southern Island with a lighthouse. I think there's some pictures of that in here. And her great masterpiece, Allen and Benner Islands, she created these worlds. It's where they lived. It was the real thing. And that's what Andy painted.
And that leads us to, correct me if I'm wrong, if Andrew referred to this photo as maybe your one-hit wonder. It might be the most well-known photo Peter's ever taken, but...
No, he didn't say that. Because we were having the conversation about, I forget what we were talking about, but all of a sudden we kind of got on the subject of one-hit wonders. So the strangest compliment, swear to God, I could ever get, because it came from like him, was, "This is your Christina's world."
Oh, right.
I wish. Really. But what's weird is I've never had this thought before. He sold Christina's World to the Museum of Modern Art for $2,500. Plus the frame. He was always quick to point out that, plus the frame, which is what, we used to sell that for, so there was a nice...
Can just because I think this is one of your first images I ever saw, and I was always curious about it, just tell us a little bit about the making of this image. Because the thing that strikes me is you're right on top of that dory of sheep. Like, are you on the bow of a boat that's right behind it, or?
We rehearsed this.
We did?
Indeed. So I mean, the quick version is that these are lawnmowers that we bought, basically, going from one island, about 11, 12 miles from Allen Island. We bought these sheep over to Allen Island to sort of live out their lives as lawnmowers on this land we had cleared. We clear-cut 40 acres off the north end of Allen. And there's only one reasonable sense, no matter how much money you've got, you don't have people out there weed eating and mowing. I mean, it's basically, you're mowing granite for the most part. Sheep are made for islands, the islands are made for sheep. We bought these, we got over there. There's a long story, this is not meant to be a plug, but on my website, ralstongallery.com, I've written out the whole story behind this and some of the other photographs. And there's a lurid and sort of inappropriate side or two to this story. But basically, it was moving them from one island to the other. The big boat, the Susan L., we were supposed to have the sheep aboard that boat, but we got out there to the island, and you'll have to go to the website to read why he wouldn't allow the sheep on his boat that day. But he said, there's not a, cleaning up the language, there's not a, one of them things 7 foot on this boat today. And, but we had to move them, so we ended up borrowing the dory. And after we borrowed the dory from Atinic Island, we steamed into Tennant's Harbor and dropped 2 or 3 of the sheep on Southern Island, which Betsy also owned, a small, gorgeous little island with some grass on it. And while there was Betsy's Aquasport, which is like a Boston whaler. I borrowed that, and she was fine. And so the horizontal version, Philip Conkling, my partner in crime at the Island Institute, was running the boat, but I wanted to get closer. So I gave the wheel of the Aquasport to Philip and said, I'm going to go up on the bow, get me close. And I went up on the bow, and He wasn't getting me close enough. I could never remember lenses, but this is like a 24 millimeter lens. This is basically what I wanted. I'd kind of thought this would be cool, but he wouldn't get me close enough. So I shouted closer, closer, and he still wasn't getting me close enough. So I said some rude things to him, and he finally put the gas to it. And we kind of shot forward, and although it's kind of flat out there, you can't really see. But we were bouncing around in the wake, the double wake of the dragger and the dory. We shoot forward, we hit the dory a good one. In the actual Kodachrome slide, this is back in days of film, you can actually see the bow rail. I almost go over. I swear to God. At the same moment, Philip does the wrong thing, which is throttle back, which just sends me further, like momentum forward. So there was just the one vertical exposure. That was that, and this is it. It was a good day.
Yeah. When we talked the other day, there was a lot about, maybe not necessarily the word fate that came in, but just think, if the lobsterman had wet the sheep on his boat, you wouldn't have a photo.
He reminds me of that every time I see him. Glenn Hall, who has since become a dear, dear, dear friend, he and his wife love them both right to pieces. He has often commented, you made more money off that shot than I made that whole year fishing. Which is not necessarily accurate, but he reminds.
So the Allen Island experiment and trying to figure out what to do with that with Betsy sort of led you and Philip to forming the Island Institute, which you guys really formed to help preserve working waterfronts and the fishing heritage of Maine and the island culture of Maine. And we could go deep into sort of all the policy things and a lot of what the Island Institute has been able to accomplish over the decades.
But we won't.
What I want to ask you about is, because when we were talking about it, you said anytime you could get out on the water, you were ready to go. Get out of the office, and you always had a camera with you, which is the key thing. If you don't have your camera, you can't take the picture. And so, but you, because as we all know, the conditions on the ocean can change, the weather can change, the light can change, but I think some of your incredible images came from you were out there a lot and you always had your camera with you. What was that like, having your camera? And I guess the thing that I'm curious, having worked on a number of lobstering stories and fishing stories for the Press Herald, fishermen are not easily won over. So how did that work for you at the start in the early 80s with the Island Institute?
Fishermen are not necessarily easily won over. No, when Philip and I started the Institute, we met on Allen Island. Again, this was Betsy's doing. Philip and I met over the Allen Island project, and ideas were shared, and there was a passion and a vision. Anyway, we started the Institute in 1983. So here we are, two guys from away, right? And even worse, we're from off island, wherever we go. And we have the support of summer people. So we were not, there was a lot of suspicion, mistrust, distrust, there were rude gestures sometimes conveyed on the water. And
so was your turning point when the rude gesture actually might have had 5 fingers up instead of single digits?
I shared with you the story. There was a Highline guy fishing off one of the North Haven. And whenever he used to see us coming, he would display very prominently the universally understood mono-digital gesture of contempt. And if we had some people with us, and it looked like maybe we were encouraging wealthy summer people to pitch in and join, we would get a double version of that. So this went on. There's an old saying, forever takes about 7 years in Maine. And what we used to show up, not just, pretty summer days, but we showed up year round. We started delivering on what we said we were going to do. It was all about community. We were in the people business, which really comes from being from a small town and wanting to make sure what happened, the destiny, the future of these incredible communities here would not be what had happened in so many other places I'd seen in my travels, especially what happened in my hometown. So anyway, we did what we could do. We went right at it. We did work hard. And there's Glenn Hall, all the way on the right. The guy over there on the right with the Red Sox cap on is Glenn Hall, who was running the boat with the dragging the dory with the sheep in it. So we really went at it. It was, the nonprofit life it's intense. And we really worked hard. There came the day, we didn't do polls about, is the tide changing? Do people like us more now? The day came when the guy from North Haven, who used to make that really easily understood gesture, there was the wave on the water, going by in the boat, and there was a wave. And then about 2 years after that, the hat came off one day. True. So we just plugged away at it. The best of the Institute years were not sitting in the endless meetings and fundraising and all the stuff you got to do in the nonprofit world. It was being out in the communities.
And I actually was going to, take a detour because I love the story behind this photo. And if you could talk about Dick and Nate a little bit.
Yeah, love to. This is down on Frenchboro, small year-round island, off Mount Desert. And we did a lot of work down there. They asked us, the Institute, out to help them. They had we were down to one kid in the school. I mean, the island was really hanging on by their nails. It was looking grim for a while. And we were able to help, and we got to know everybody, which was a joy. And I was just out there one day, and this was Dick Lunt, great-grandfather of Nate. And it's quite a family. It's Lunt Harbor. The Lunts have been out there forever. And little Nate had this cod that had gotten jammed in one of his father's lobster traps. And this was like a found cod. And Nate really had a thing for this cod. They gave it to him. He lugged it around for days. Swear to God. It was some rank. It was really foul. And his mother was bitching about it because, she had made him this beautiful sweater, and the sweater was now foul, and it was pretty grim. So I asked Dick, Nate was quite proud of the fish. Could, Dick and Nate stand there by the old pump? And I got the photograph, and as I was doing it, I found myself thinking, is Nate and his peers, his cohorts, that age group, are they going to be able to hold on to what they've got as successfully as he's holding on to that nasty fish? And anyway, that's the photograph. The great thing is that Dick is no longer with us. Nate is about 6'4". I now call him Sir. And he's doing gangbusters. And the community is tighter than it's been for a very, very long time. There you go. You've choreographed this well.
I tried.
So that's the Frenchboro, that's the entire student body on Frenchboro that year. You can tell who's related to who, huh? You don't need to be a geneticist. But that was the whole student body. They really did come close to going belly up. And I'm not going to do a whole institute thing, but there were once 300 year-round islands on the coast of Maine. Today there are 15. That's 285 communities belly up, some of which ineluctably for economic and whatever reasons. I'm not going to go there all the way, but it's this community stuff that really always has drawn me in more than the obvious physical beauty. I think those are the two real defining characteristics of this coast, the physical beauty, duh. I mean, it's amazing. It's really amazing. But it's the people and it's the character of the communities.
I think there was a quote in that documentary where you said the danger in photographing the coast of Maine is that it's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Because it would be very easy to come off with postcard photos.
Oh, yeah, I mean, blind photo, you know this, you're a wonderful photographer. All those photographs we were looking at before we started here tonight, they're all Gregs, you know. And not just beautiful photographs, they're really soulful photographs. It's anybody, you know, can go out there and make pretty pictures. I mean, it's the coast of Maine, for God's sake. But to try to go a little deeper, that's what I've always tried to do. You know, some come perilously close to pretty, you know. You kind of can't help it, but it's going a little deeper, and not to invoke Andy and Betsy unduly, but that was their genius, you know, to stay in one place and not go broad and wide, but, you know, try to go deeper.
And this, I just had to throw this photo in. It's a little blown out on the screen, but when I saw this up in Peter's gallery last week, I knew I had no reason in the talk to bring this up, but I just love this photo so much. I'm like, everybody's got to see this photo, because these are the turbines on Vinyl Haven. And clearly you're up in the air and you're flying in a small plane, and that's what I thought. I'm looking around like, yeah, so where did you guys end up landing? Because you can't see anything.
It was so cool. So I'd flown, some of us know who Polly Guth was. We had flown down to photograph Polly's house off Northeast Harbor that morning, and it was already just this ocean of fog. I'd never seen in the air that much fog. It was just the whole coast. And by the time we got back to Penobscot Bay, the only thing we could see of Penobscot Bay were the turbine heads and the very top of Isle of Ho. Everything else was gone. And it had gone inland far enough that the pilot and I are talking to each other, you know, in headsets, and my daughter and a friend of hers are in the back seat. And my daughter reacted strongly. It was, "Daddy," when he announced, "We're going to have to land on a driving range down near Port Clyde." There was one little place that was still open. We landed, I swear to God, on a golf driving range. He said, "This is going to be like a controlled crash." "Daddy." But, you know, you do what you can. You know, it wasn't like we were going to die. But you got to take chances. I mean, God.
So another theme through your work that I think is incredibly amazing is when you get on the islands, you have really great photos of the people on the islands, but you also have this knack of showing the people who used to be there through what's left. And I have a few images that talk to that, but this, you can talk about, this is called Tumblehome, and I forget what island this is from.
So this is the north end of Matinic, the island that the sheep came from. And yeah, there's just something, there's so many instances. What intrigues me, you can walk through wooded islands, I mean, thick wood, you know, trees with trunks almost like this, that have been there for a long time, and you'll come across a wall in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of a forest. You know, that was once a field. And you come across, on some islands, these old, beautiful carved granite pieces. Well, you know there were quarries on these islands, but you know, what other stories? I mean, there's something about being able to make portraits of people who are no longer here. And that's certainly what this one is. And I should point out, here we are at Portland Museum of Art, much beloved by Betty Noyce, who was a dear friend. God, I loved her. And I titled this Tumblehome. She quite liked this. I titled it Tumblehome because obviously it's a home that has tumbled, but Tumblehome was the name of Betty's yacht. So it was kind of like for her.
And this photo is called Partners. And this, is it accurate to call it a portrait of you and Philip?
Yeah, it's, I don't want to overdo this, but metaphor intrigues me. And there's so much there, you know this, and, around us, that sometimes if you isolate something, or if you have an overactive imagination, you can kind of gin this stuff up. Metaphoric portraits, or things can become something that they're not. And this one's really pretty simple. I mean, Philip and I worked together forever, and it's a portrait of partners. Not just Philip and me, but you know, it speaks to the quality of working together. I love making images that do speak to maybe the better angels, the qualities that ultimately weave community tighter and, closer together.
And I'm just going to go through some images from the coast, but I'm going to fast forward us to 1997. After about 20 years of cruising around on the Maine coast, in the summer of '97, you published your acclaimed book, Sightings. I don't know if anyone here has it, but it's out of print, so if you don't, you're either out of luck or you can find a used copy
eBay, Amazon.
on Amazon like I did.
I don't get any money from it, but it's...
But you were also doing some, selling a lot of prints, and so you, like the culmination of 20 years of all that work, you were seeing, that the fruit of that and really having some success. And as an artist, you found yourself, you had told me you had found yourself wondering, well, what do I do next? What do I do now? We've done this, where do we go from here? And then in the fall of 1997, fate or whoever provided you an answer. You want to talk about that experience in the fall of '97?
If I must. So yeah, Sightings had come out and things were going great. The Institute was doing well, and 20 years of work comes bubbling up into this book published by Down East, and things were just steaming along really pretty good. And then I had just to cut to it, a cerebral hemorrhage and almost died. I was wicked sick. And that brought everything to a screeching halt. I didn't pick up a camera for 6 years after that, at all, really. And what you're referring to is I had been thinking, when Sightings came out, there's sort of a given, sort of a conventional protocol that, artists are supposed to kind of periodically come up with a new vision or a new body of work, shift gears and do something altogether different. And there was this short time between Sightings coming out, actually getting published, and the time that I kind of shorted out, where I was thinking, now what? What am I going to do? I was really confused. What now? Cook up some whole new different thing. And then that question was like taken away from me. I had no, I shorted out, and 6 years later, and there's somebody in the room here tonight who I saw, and she knows who she is, whose folks were instrumental.
This is...
Go with this?
Yeah, no, yeah, I was going to say, Terry didn't believe me earlier when I said that I love almost every one of your stories, but the story you're about to tell, coming out of the tail end of that 6 years of recovery, is one of my all-time favorite stories.
Oh, well. God's truth, I hadn't picked up a camera in 6 years, and we have somebody here with us tonight, and I was sitting with her parents. They were dear, dear friends, and they suckered me. They totally got me. It was at their house, and lots of wine, lovely dinner. It was just the three of us. And they allowed that, being retired, and they were comfortable financially, that they were going to do a lot more travel and see more of the world. And there was a famous photographer and his family, distantly related. And they wanted to know what the best possible camera system they could buy. They wanted to go out digital, because they had heard me say that digital had come along and was up to the quality at that point of really good professional Kodachrome film. What should we get? So I rattle off all this really expensive, high-end, this is like top shelf, this is what you need to get. And then they filled up my wine and said, tomorrow we're calling B&H Photo in New York, and we're buying all of this, and it's our wedding present to you and Terry. Get back on the horse. And it did it. And it was less, it was as much a gift of faith and love and encouragement as it was hardware. But it worked. And that's the story. And it was on their island. This is
one of the first images you made with it.
It was early after that, and Terry was asleep in their house. I took our dog and was out walking around early in the morning, and I didn't arrange this. I don't do that. This was just there. There's a guy on the island who collects stuff, and You know, I saw this, and I titled this "The Source." And again, you know, this is, you know, rich in metaphor. I saw this very simply as love and faith. The heart's shaped rocks representing love, and the anchor representing faith, not religion. Faith, whatever that is. And I really believe that faith and love are the source of most goodness in this world. And it was, you know, their faith and goodness that got me, you know, back on the horse.
And so, would you say that in your, you know, as you started photographing again, did you look at things a little bit differently, or did you feel maybe more free just to photograph what you had been doing? I think when we talked, we were discussing the idea that was certainly true with Andrew was to go deep, was to take one thing and really go deep with it. And did you find yourself saying, no, I just need to go deeper with Maine?
Well, I definitely looked at things differently after the whole medical bit. You know, I came really close to checking out. I mean, it was like really close. So you do tend to look at things slightly differently. And I don't know, I think somehow, and I had fallen in love with Terry. And I mean, these two miracles together kind of brought more empathy. I think it slowed me down, but in a really nice kind of chill way. And I wasn't thinking about going deeper. This will sound, I mean, I was just about to say, you know, it's like I was deeper, but that is so pompous sounding, and that sounds really stupid. I've never said that before. But it just, I guess it just kind of put me into a different place wherein you kind of value relationships. Can we go back to that last one?
Yeah.
I won't do this all night, I swear. But I mean, this one, Long Island, out here in Casco Bay, I was just walking along the shore. This was after, you know, this is, you know, now I'm shooting digitally and I'm back. And I saw this. I mean, it's just a piece of pot warp and a piece of rockweed in the sand. But I completely, totally saw it as, you know, pure metaphor. This is relationships. This is every couple, everybody who's sitting here with, you know, somebody. This is all about relationships. What brought that piece of pot warp, you know, buried, you know, half buried in the sand, together with that piece of rockweed and just this kind of, this tango, but they're really tangled in together. So it was metaphor and it was relationships.
Right.
As is this.
And the relationships continue with you titled this one Couples.
Couples. Yeah. I've been married before. And I'm married today. Bada bing.
So we're getting close to time for the audience to ask questions. I have two more things I want to hit. One, I want to talk about a few individual photos and just sort of, because one of the things I try to do at work is I'm not always satisfied with the picture I just took. I think there's a different way of looking at things, or I can maybe do something differently. And that's why I love this story about this photo that this was shot on slide film many years ago, and you sort of had an epiphany on, because you were, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, this was sort of a ho-hum image, didn't think much of it, and you one day had an epiphany on the white table.
Well, one day I got the slide back, you know, from, you know, the slide had all the slides on the light table, and I looked at it and thought, well, that's banal, that's boring. I mean, done before, everybody's seen it. And then, I mean, just for the hell of it, I kind of turned it around, did a 180 with it, cue, and yeah, that worked. So, I mean, this was just, you like this, because, I mean, it was just kind of an accident.
Right.
But, you know, accidents, who was it, Goodyear spilled whatever rubber became on a stove, and eureka, there's rubber. You know, things happen. So I think part of, you know, what we do as artists, whether you're writing or it's music or whatever, you got to take chances. And it's not like I'm risking my life doing any of this stuff, but sort of break rules. The first version of that, was the way it was when I was actually out rowing around and the little fish swam into the picture. I love that fish swam in there. That was so cool. But I knew that day, having done the earlier inversion of the boat, that I wanted to try inverting this one. So where it didn't really work before, upside down, I titled it Dream because it really was feeling dreamy. And this time I really did kind of pre-visualize it as upside down being surreal. And the theories everybody has about, were you underwater? Did you use mirrors? How did you do this? It was just,
And the next
That's
one, you titled this one Courtship, and these are the fireworks in Camden.
Yep.
Which it's a lovely fireworks photograph, but I'll get up to point this out. If it's hard to see, but is it this one here?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's that's essentially a rock, and you're thinking, well, I photographed the fireworks from when. I wonder what they look like from out there. But it wasn't as easy to get there. Yeah.
Before you do this, how bad are we on time?
We should be wrapping up. We got a couple minutes.
Okay, so I can't do the story I really want to do, but we'll do this story.
All right.
Yeah, so the fireworks from Camden, but there's this ledge out a mile off Camden called the Graves, and I just wondered if I get myself up on, and there's this old concrete pad there that once had a steel, day signal for sailors. If I could get up on that, I love fireworks, by the way, and I thought, and I know how to photograph them well. If I can get out there and do a 180 back in towards Camden, so we went out in my boat and I rode onto this ledge. It was a mess, but it was so cool to basically be looking back a complete 180. To see it from offshore, and it was great because it was out there. Everybody else was in town. They took our boat, and went into the harbor, and they're partying and having a good time. I'm out there, tripod camera. I took a cold beer out with me, and these birds, all the birds were out there, and it was dark, and I was alone. It was just fantastic. That's that one. They wouldn't let me back on the boat because I was covered with bird mess, shall we say. Terry suggested, you get in the skiff, which I needed to get off this ledge, and we're going to tow you back to Rockport.
Okay, I think I'd open it up to questions at this point. If anyone has any questions they'd like to ask Peter, we have 2 mics on either side up front here. If you can make your way to those mics to ask your question. And if no one gets up too soon, I actually have another question I can ask.
Oh, ask it.
Go for it.
Okay, so while we're getting ready, I'll try to do this quick, but one of the things we talked about...
I will try to.
And this came on my radar because of you, but I am now completely in love with this word, creencia, Spanish word. And it's a metaphysical term, and what I've learned, because I'm a language nerd, is that it comes from the verb querer, which is to desire or want. But in the terms of creencia, it sort of means, it's metaphysical, it's a place where you feel safe, where you feel at home, but even more interesting to me is a place where a person draws their strength of character from. I love that idea. And you have described Maine as your creencia.
Yeah. Well, actually, I don't know, that's a different derivation. The one I heard with creencia is it's like sacre coeur, the Latin for heart. So creencia really does speak to those places where your heart feels completely, I'm safe. This is where I belong. This is it. This is really where I'm supposed to be. And Maine is that? Terry's that?
Yeah, so go ahead.
First, I want to say thank you for helping me get a ticket tonight
Okay.
through my friends.
Yeah.
And
I did scalp one ticket.
Yes, thank you very much.
Ben, who is photo director, if I got the title right?
Yes,
Of
sir.
Down East Magazine. So all the good stuff you see in Down East is right here. Great photographer.
Hello. So I have two questions. First one, I want you to talk more about the philosophy of going deep. I think I read that you got that from the YS, but it's obviously very evident in your work that you do go deep, and talk a little more about what that means for people who are making art. And then I want to hear about what you're excited about now and in the future.
Oh. So the first question is, what is it about going deep?
Yeah.
Well, it's easy, you know this, and we all, if you're a creative sort, it's easy to play on a surface level, but it gets a lot more challenging and a whole lot more interesting if you're going down deeper. And how to define deeper? More truth.
More soul.
More soul, yeah. Places where maybe it's not comfortable. Look at Andy's work. I mean, there's the best definition. I mean, he's a great example of somebody who successfully, I think, really went deep over a lifetime. If that's kind of an answer, I don't know.
Yeah.
And what am I pumped about now?
Yeah.
That would be the next book. So I'm working on another book. But I think that, really and truly, family aside, the most exciting thing is every time, for me, so often it happens when I pick up the cameras and some other stuff and go down to the boat and take off, having no clue necessarily where I'm going. What I'm going to do is just go hang out and just go poke around and see where it leads. I still love that.
That's awesome.
And it's all going to come together in a book, I hope, within a year.
Is it going to be much different than sightings, do you think? More like
you're good.
your day-to-day
Yeah.
exploration, just kind of going off in the boat?
Okay, I think the big difference, and this kind of circles back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. I think the difference between this one and sightings is maybe, there's some difference in the images, but I've started writing out the stories behind the images, and it's not what lens and f-stop and all that. It's like what's going on, in Looney Land, sort of what's behind it. And I kind of got, freed up, when I sort of scraped by there back in 97 and 98. And I love sort of talking about, you shouldn't talk about your work. Your statement should be the image and just shut up and let it go at that. Many of you know I can't help myself. So that's going to be a part of this book, and the stories have been appreciated. So I don't know.
Yeah, if you want to get a taste of what the book is going to be like, I would encourage you to go to Peter's blog at his website, because you talk about a lot of the photos there, and it's extremely entertaining reading.
You still want to buy the book?
Yes.
But the blog is free.
And I'm just
Thank you, Ben.
switching through a few final images, but we have time for a few more questions. Wow, nobody has any questions.
They're all terrified of the long answers. Go for it.
Yeah.
So this is really a question for you both. I understand you're now hooked to Maine, and you're glad to be here, but you both traveled a lot. Where would you go next because of what's happening in the world right now, and what would you like to do in terms of photography and art in that world?
That would have been really difficult a little, more than a year and a half ago, but last summer, I'll do this really fast, I was given this extraordinary opportunity to join a friend on his private yacht. And we went up the west coast of Greenland. Originally, the idea was to do the whole Northwest Passage, and we couldn't do it. There was a tragedy back in the States, and the owner had to leave the boat. We ended up seeing Ilulissat, the big ice, the big glacier in Greenland. And then we spent a month in the heart of the Northwest Passage, above Baffin Island, and really in the heart, many say the best of it, the high Canadian archipelago. And I just fell in love with it. I mean, wicked raging case of Arctic fever. And it blew me away. I mean, all these years of kicking around, small communities here on the coast of Maine, in a way, sort of primed me in some way for the Inuit villages and what's happening there. And every day we were seeing, not just the big ice in Greenland, but every single day we were seeing these small but unbelievable telling indicators of climate change, And as a storyteller, I'm so fired up about what I saw there and feel this enormous obligation, and I've been doing it, sharing sort of these Arctic observations about, that are just undeniable. Guess what? It's not a Chinese hoax, and I'm not a scientist, but, here's a picture of a bumblebee at 75 degrees north, and on and on and on. I'd go back there in a heartbeat. I got to finish this book or I will be ostracized by a publisher, an agent, and probably Terry. So that's
And Peter is giving a talk at the Portland Public Library on November 28th about his experience in the Arctic, but my understanding is that it's sold out. So if you know someone at the Portland Public Library, maybe you can get lucky and get a ticket. But I know that you sometimes do talks in other places as well. You gave one at the Camden Library?
Yeah, all over.
I think for me, that was a good question because I don't really think about it too much. My initial response, I was thinking I'd like to go to some areas where some Maine nonprofits are having an impact in the world. Like there are medical missions. There's a nonprofit in Portland called Partners for World Health, and they're really doing amazing work with not used, but medical supplies that haven't expired, and they bring them to places like Bangladesh. And I actually have pitched that story to the paper. So if Lisa's listening,
where's Lisa?
Tell Cliff to approve that travel budget for me. But in a grander scale, if I could get a sabbatical, like if I could get a year off, I think what really interests me are to document places in the world that are disappearing, communities, and just nature in general, whether that's because of global warming or storms along the coasts of Asia, deforestation in parts of the rainforest. We're losing bits of the earth, and there's a part of me that maybe part historian, part documentarian, I'd like to record those before they're gone. Because there's really, not to go back to the beautiful postcard thing, but there's some beautiful places in this world that I'm concerned that when I ever have grandchildren, they're not going to be around for them to see, and I think there should be some record of them.
Yeah, amen. What we get to do, what is so wonderful, and I grew up, this is before we had glowing screens and smartphones and laptops and all that. We didn't get a TV till we were, well along as a family, as kids. There were magazines, and, it was Life magazine, it was National Geographic were the formative things for me. And I thought back then, those people are the luckiest people on earth. They get to make these amazing pictures, and they get paid to go places. I don't get paid to go places anymore. I go where I want to go and whatnot. I guess what I'm saying though is what really juices me, and your work, you have beautiful individual images. We can make beautiful images, but we also get to tell stories. And I swear to God, we all know about the much ballyhooed 1%, You know, if you're in the 1%, you're making $380,000 a year or whatever it is. I believe with all my heart that you're in the 1%. If you get to do what you love to do, you get to do it in a place that you love, you get to work with people and around people you trust and respect, maybe even love. If it counts for something, if it's meaningful, that's 1%, and we're there. But still give them the raise and the travel budget, Lisa.
I think that's a perfect way to end, and oh, we have another question.
Oh,
Sorry, I didn't
Bruce.
see you standing there.
Bruce.
My apologies. You were leading into such a good ending, too.
But then, what could be a better than Bruce?
Peter, I'm just wondering how many photographs, say, per month you might take on average.
Oh, God.
And in one way, I think you just answered. Part of my next question was, what survives and how many simply just never get to see the light of day? My sense is that maybe 1 out of 300 or 400 or something.
Oh, 1 out of thousands. Really?
Well, you have thousands of pictures.
Well, okay, so
But, yeah.
I don't shoot as much as I would like to these days. I'm not out and about as much as I would fully love to be, and I'm working on that. There are, peaks and valleys. And
Yes.
in the Arctic, that Arctic trip, it was so intense. I shot I was shooting a lot every day. It was all new and fresh. Coast of Maine is still new and fresh to me. I've been over that ground over and over and over. I guess I'm more discerning. I don't go quite, if I see a puffin, I don't fall out of the boat with excitement. I've seen them before. There's a lighthouse, my God. No. So I am a little more discerning, which feels good. I guess there's a maturity, believe it or not, in there somewhere. So I'm shooting less, enjoying it more. The work that, National Geographic photographers, I've heard, these are really good shooters. Their rate of return is 10,000 exposures for one that makes it into any of their publications, not even the Yellow God magazine. So I don't know what my rate of return is, but still for me, we were talking about this the other day, one of the absolute most exciting things is, even though it's digital, you can look in the back of the camera and see what you've done. I don't really do that. The excitement is coming back to the studio in Rockport and seeing what I did. It's kind of like fishing, I think of what I do as kind of like these guys I know that fish. You're working for yourself, you get up early, you stay out late, you got an eye on the weather / light. You got to know the rules, what rules you got to obey, which you can break, and there are no guarantees. You work your tail off, and you get, on a good day, you get more keepers than a bad day. If that makes...
Thank you.
But the best of it is, just going out. This last one here was a fluke, and this is relatively recent. It's every once in a while, there's like syzygy, everything lines up, and it's like, oh my God. And this is still really exciting to me, And there'll be more days like that. That's what keeps me going. Thank you, Bruce.
I think we both consider ourselves lucky ducks that we get to roam around Maine and take photos for a living. And I used to think I had the best job in the state, and then I started seeing Peter's work, and there's a guy who has a job just a little bit better than mine.
I had a boat. Yeah, that helped.
Well, we have reached the end. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you,
you.
Peter.